Hi, folks. I'm just letting the other sites know that we're going to get started shortly. So if people in all four sites could take their seats, we want to get the show on the road as close to 11 o'clock as possible. Thanks.
Okay. Can everybody hear me okay? Good morning. I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. Since we are gathered in 4 locations, I think it's important to take the time to acknowledge our gratitude for the ability to live, work, and play in each of them. Toronto, or Takaranto, is located in the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, as well as the Mississauga of the Credit First Nation. This place is on the land covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit, the William Treaty signed with multiple Mississaugas, and the Chippewa bands, and the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant. Waterloo is on land we recognize as the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Shinnehtun, and the Haudenosaunee peoples, which is covered by the Halimadad Treaty. This land is also understood to be protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Covenant. Ottawa is on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. Thunder Bay is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, including Fort Williams First Nation, and is the territory of the Robinson Superior Treaty. We also acknowledge that this is the land of the Métis peoples. I'd like to invite you to take a moment to consider the place you call home and to reflect on the Indigenous peoples who have stewarded the land since time immemorial, maintaining a deep and reciprocal relationship with the natural world based on kinship, balance, and respect for all living beings. Thank you to everybody who made time to attend in person today here in Toronto, as well in Thunder Bay, Ottawa, and Waterloo. Thanks as well to the people who are watching in the live stream now, and a future thanks to all of you who might be viewing it after the fact on the college's YouTube channel. We are really thrilled to have the opportunity to hold this type of hybrid event. We ran 6 virtual town halls last year, but this is the first in-person event since before the pandemic. So it's really, really nice to see all of you in person today. So just a little housekeeping before we get into the meeting. I want to introduce the council members and the college staff who are at each site. In Thunder Bay, the council host is Annabelle Helen. Annabelle is a professional member who was elected to the Central District this past June. With Annabelle are Nakai Garnett, Director of Regulatory Affairs, and Christina Reyes, Manager of Registrant Requirements. In Ottawa, the council host is Janet Cullen, who was elected to the All-Ontario District also in June. Staff with Janet are Mark Pirio, Deputy Registrar and General Counsel to the College, and Sarah Fraser, Director of Registration. In Waterloo, the council host is Haiti Ahonen, who is a professional member from the West District, and I'm pleased to say is also the college's vice president. With Haiti are Jenna Smith, Manager of Professional Conduct, and Alexander Brennan, Manager of Registration. I'm Callie Hewitt-Blackie here in Toronto, and I'm a professional member from the Central District and president of the College Council. With me is right here, Amy. Where's Amy? Back. Amy's at the back. Amy, can you just stand up so people can see where you are? There's Amy. Amy is our governance manager, and Adina Strom right there, who is our investigations manager, and Deborah Adams right here is the registrar and CEO of the college. I want to thank Tamara Bryan, who our new communications manager. Where's Tamara? Right there. And thank you, Tamara, for all your work on this event. As well as Pam Bialik, our policy analyst, whose contributions to the college work you will see throughout this presentation. Pam does a whole lot of work for this college, as does everybody. I should also note that we held a peer circle session with about 50 people this morning, thanks to Sonia Teese. Where are you? There's Sonia. our QA manager, along with Madeline Lee and Monica. Monica, I always pronounce your name incorrectly. Zabalos Cuban, did I say it correct? Both senior coordinators and the rest of the QA team. If you guys can just stand up, do you mind standing up and so everybody can see who you are? And we want to thank you for all your work. And we also have Priscilla Jesse, who's our operations assistant, here with us today. So we have about an hour of material to present before we open the floor to questions from everybody at the 4 sites. Once we do that, your hosts will help you access mics so that you can be heard over the Zoom connection. We are really keen to make this as interactive as possible, and we realize, we do have stuff that we need to present, so that part of it won't be interactive. And if you have any questions that come up during the course of the presentation, please note them so you can ask them later.
Sorry. Just before we move on, we're just going to get our live stream started. So if we could just pause for 1 second while the tech team gets the live stream going so that people who weren't able to make it to one of the sites can watch. So sorry, folks, if we could we'll take that pause so we make sure that we're good and sound on the live front.
Okay, everybody, sorry for that little interlude there.
Many thanks to everyone who took the time to submit questions and topic of interest and concern through the SurveyMonkey poll before today's town hall. We built the content of the presentation today based on those submissions so that we could address as many of the issues as we possibly could in the hour that we have. It may be hard to see from the graph here, but we grouped the questions and topics together by theme, and it was clear that people were interested in hearing about the growth in the number of registrants and the implications that might be having, clinical supervision, cross-border practice, college statistics in terms of applications, registration, the QA program results, and conduct matters. We have all of that covered today, along with education program recognition updates, college work on understanding the implications of artificial intelligence in the regulatory context, as well as for practitioners, and progress on our trauma-informed reviews, updates on the changes that are being considered at the College of Psychologists and Behavioral Analysts of Ontario, and the entry to practice competency review process, among other things. I'd like to note that we received some questions that were related to standards of practice and regulatory obligations that we won't have time to address today, since we want to concentrate on new and developing issues and initiatives. We will cover anything that's being or has been recently updated, but for any questions that remain, I'd encourage you to take a look at the Practice Matters section of the website, where we have a growing bank of resources to reach out to the Practice Advisory Service for assistance with specific practice and standards related questions, or to email the college. We'll share email addresses at the end of the presentation today. We appreciate that people may have questions about their own particular situation. In the interest of protecting confidentiality, we won't be answering those types of questions. As I said, we will be sharing email addresses at the end of the presentation, and I would encourage you to use them, or if you have time, to connect with staff at the end of the town hall today. So just some quick numbers to provide a sense of the growth in registrant numbers. This is the registration statistics page from our annual report for the 2024 calendar year. As you can see, there was a 15% growth from 2023. As of last week, we had a total of 17,031 registrants. Now that means we are a very big college. We had 11,075 RPs, 5,729 RP qualifying, and 227 RP inactive. There was also a 38.5% increase in the total applications received this fiscal over last year. Within those applications, we saw a 74.3% increase in non-recognized applications. 3 new educational programs were recognized, bringing the total to 33 programs who have undergone an external review and have found to demonstrate that they meet the requirements for registration. As I mentioned, there were a significant number of questions about the number of new registrants, their readiness to practice, particularly if they chose to set up a private practice while still in the qualifying category.
And the college's role in relationship to the issue of market saturation. We will cover these issues as we move through the rest of the presentation.
Okay. Yep. Thanks. Sorry, we're just having the audio stuff go in the background there. So I'm going to do just a few quick updates on the exam to give you some context around statistics, and then we're going to talk about the implications of the exam as part of one of the gates to registration. So we recently had an exam sitting. It was October the 22nd through the 24th. Folks who wrote that sitting will be getting their results in about 6 weeks. You can see from the graph here that the numbers are starting to trend. We offer the exam through Compass. It's a third-party exam provider. It happens twice a year, and the numbers are close to or above 1,000 in most of the sittings. I think it's important to talk about the exam as one of those gates to entry to practice, because it's necessary for people to do that to complete the registration requirements. Supervision is recommended at a frequency of once a week, and it's a requirement until the exam is passed and people move into that next stage of registration. We see robust clinical supervision happening. We know that it was something that was going on in the profession before the college was on the scene. It's actually a hallmark of good psychotherapy. And we know that we've got practitioners who've been around working for a long time who are still engaging in peer or other kinds of supervision. The other piece that I really want to point to is the fact that we mine the data coming out of all of the college's regulatory processes, including the exam. And so what that allows us to do is to look for trends and themes. If we see that there's a particular cohort or a particular program that are raising flags for us, it gives us the opportunity to dig in a little bit and try and understand why that's the case. We want to make sure that we're balancing accommodations. As we see increasing numbers of people write, we see an increasing number of requests for accommodations, and we want to balance those accommodations with the integrity of the exam to make sure that it continues to be a reasonable gateway into the practice. The overall pass rate is about 87 and a half. It hovers, goes up and down, as you can see from the graph there. But that's a reasonable pass rate for a high stakes exam. We look at things like, are internationally trained individuals struggling? Is that another marker that we can rely on to see where the exam is working or not working, as the case may be? So I think it's important that we sort of keep track of those things and we continue to report on them. We do have an exam committee that's responsible for that, and they are working in close conjunction with our registration committee. We saw 2 administrative changes to the regulation reg over the last year. It takes a really long time to get regulation changes. Oh, I think we lost our slides. What happened there? I'm seeing them down here. Sorry, folks. Give us a sec. Thanks, Amy. I'll keep talking. It's just a picture of the registration regulation, so you're not missing much. Oh, there we go. We're back up. Thanks. So we did see two minor changes to the registration regulation this year. They're largely administrative. We basically added the word successfully to ensure absolute clarity that applicants are required to have completed their program successfully as one of the registration requirements. And the second was to shift the exam deadline to anchor it to when someone is registered as opposed to when somebody applies. So if somebody applies and it takes a while for them to complete their program and to make good on their registration, that clock ticking means that they have less than 2 years to make their first attempt at the exam. So we made that shift in the favor of folks who are waiting to write the exam so that they have a little bit of a longer window. Let's make sure I don't lose the slides again. I want to move on to some, again, the QA program statistics just to set the scene for you. And then when Callie comes back up to present, we can have larger conversations about the implications of that program. As you probably know, under legislation, we're required to have a quality assurance program. In fact, all 26 colleges in Ontario, the regulatory health colleges, are required to have a QA program. And so we need to monitor registrant participation in compliance with that program. And the requirements, the self-assessment, the peer assessment, the remediation work, if it's needed, are pretty common across the colleges. They look different, obviously, in terms of the professional specificity, but we all have those elements. The questions that we had were largely about the case-based assessment, which is why the slide here is showing you the results of the sittings that have happened so far. We have one sitting that just finished, and we have people who are coming through and waiting for their results on that front. Those will be out in a couple of weeks. But 4,778 people have had their results so far, with the next cohort about to get them. And of those 4778, only 85 required peer support. So less than 2% of people, which means that we've got a cumulative average across all those sittings of about 92% of people who are completing the assessment and having no problem with it. For the folks who are in the self-directed professional development, that sort of middle basket, about 8% of people so far, we're not asking them to do more in terms of their quality assurance professional development hours. We're just asking them to tie some of those 40 hours that are required over the course of the 2 years to the results of their CBA assessment. And so we want to really be clear about the point of the assessment, which is really to make sure that we're providing you with an opportunity to self-assess your risk. Not understanding or being able to apply the standards is what puts you at real risk of breaching them and risking the complaint or report about your client care. And so the educational opportunity that the CBA is providing is really the key piece. We appreciate that it's one more thing that you have to do. Folks who clear the hurdle do so and don't have to come back to it for 5 years. And folks who don't, as I said, need to tie it to their professional development. So it's not high stakes. You have the practice standards open with you. We encourage you to participate in things like peer circles and use the preparatory resources that are online beforehand. We do provide 7 hours to complete the assessment, but we're finding that most people are done within around the 3-hour mark. The reason we moved to the 7 hours was to make it sort of more universally designed. So people don't have to ask for accommodations if they need more time. You can have a break, you can have a snack, you could come back to it. We really want people to engage with the standards. And so I think that it's doing its job. So even for those people who clear the hurdle, the fact that you've spent the time thinking about the standards, spent the time engaging with the standards through the situational judgment cases is a real risk assessment for you and for the college. This piece is where I want to talk about the value add that the quality assurance program brings to folks who are struggling. So if somebody is not able to get a passing assessment in 2 tries at the CBA with some college support in the middle, they get an opportunity to meet with staff for an hour to discuss the assessment, the platform, to understand how to prepare for it. Then they rewrite. And if they, again, don't manage to achieve the level that they need to, then they're offered peer coaching. And peer coaching is with a trained assessor. It's with somebody who's in active practice. And it's an opportunity for them to go through the work that they're doing and to make sure that they're developing a plan that will actually help them bridge the gap in their knowledge or their competence. So we're trying really hard to move away from a checklist approach to quality assurance to give registrants who need it the support that they need. The other piece about this is it really does allow the college to direct resources to folks who need it, as opposed to the old peer and practice review process, which was a random selection and left many people, that 92% of folks who were doing okay, involved in a peer practice review process that was overly onerous for them when they didn't need it. So this really is about the right touch approach, where we're taking our resources, putting them into the folks who need it, as opposed to, sort of really burdening everybody with a more involved process. I'm going to pass it back to Callie, so she can talk about the practice advisory.
It's like we're tag teaming here. Okay, so CRPO sees the practice advisory service as part of the proactive quality assurance program element. So that's really important. So to think about, what is proactive, it means that you can reach out if you need help. And it's very important that you can think of that as a really important resource for yourself. Our practice advisory service is comprised of experienced RPs and staff. The service is meant to be an educational resource that provides support to registrants in using their professional judgment. So if you're not sure about something, this is where you can reach to engage with the college to ask. As you can see from these statistics, the practice advisory is a really well-used service among our registrants and members of the public. This slide shows the numbers of queries received each quarter, with a steady increase in queries throughout the years. We review the themes within the queries we receive, and the most commonly asked queries are published in the communiques and our website as Practice Matters articles. We also use these as parts of our self-reflection. They are windows into where registrants might be struggling to meet standards, and so they're an opportunity to decide where to focus our proactive efforts. For example, topics for peer circles, focusing on case weighting in QA assessment, places where we need to provide more and more clear guidance. I want to spend a bit of time on conduct statistics and to cover the work we are doing to support everyone involved in the complaints process to ensure that it is both fair and efficient. This graph comes from our annual report covering 2024. The categories that are used to are aligned with the Government College Performance Measurement Framework, fondly known as the CPMF. You know, since I've been at the CRPO, I realized we have a lot of acronyms, and you have to learn them all when you sit on any committee. So that's always a challenge. And so this isn't completely matched to our standards because of that. We use complete reviews of the complaints data, much like we do with exam data, to consider what proactive measures we can take to address themes and trends. We ask ourselves these types of questions. Are there particular groups of registrants who are facing practice challenges related to one standard or another? Do we need to look at supportive resources to help guide registrants? So we see that from the data that we get from the complaints department. Once we are collecting self-identification data, which I will speak to later in the presentation, we are also able to take more of an equity-focused review of this information. For example, we want to be able to answer whether there are disparities in the number of kinds of complaints that are coming in and from or about members of equity-deserving communities. So here are the actual numbers over the last 2 years and up until the beginning of September of this year. We are tracking to have close to 200 complaints this year. But if you consider the number of registrants that we have, that is not actually a lot. So an increase over last year, but this is to be expected with the increase in registrants. Like, remember, we have 17,000 plus registrants. I know this is a very small graph, apologies for that, but it's the result of a benchmarking study that was done in 2023. And you can see the arrow there, that's where we are. CRPO comes in at 8 complaints to every 1,000 registrants. And I think this speaks volumes to the safe and ethical care being provided by our profession. So we can all be very proud of that. It says something about you know, how we're operating as clinicians. This chart is from the college performance measurement for 2024. You can see that the committee decided to take no action or provide written advice to the vast majority of cases which were deemed low risk. So, you know, that's important. Specified continuing education and remediation programs and undertakings are used in cases where there's a medium risk identified. So in ICRC, what's important to remember, there's a take no action and there's a scale that goes right up to when it would be referred to discipline. And discipline cases are infrequent, as I mentioned, and are reserved for instances where there would be an egregious breach of standards, such as fraud or sex abuse. Most cases are resolved with some kind of remediation, which would be more educational in nature. So reports are a bit different than complaints. They are governed under Section 75(1)A of the Health Professions Procedural Code and have a different process at the outset than complaints. These matters are typically resolved without a formal investigation, with a closure letter and on occasion advice to the registrant. If an investigator is appointed under Section 75(1)A of the code, the ICRC, which is the Inquiries, Complaints, Reports Committee, must dispose of the matter. As such, the potential outcomes are the same as the potential outcomes arising from a complaint. For the 23 matters that were formally investigated, more than half were considered to be low to medium risk by the ICRC. The complaints and reports processes are designed to be fair, not punitive, with a focus on improving public safety and holding registrants responsible for practicing in alignment to the standards. So that's how we assess whether a registrant's behavior has not been good. It's whether they've deviated or they're not in alignment with practice standards. That's how that's determined. The ICRC serves as a screening committee to determine where remediation is possible. So that's what I was talking about before, which is more educative, and to provide direction on what remediation needs to include. The committee works to balance the underlying belief, and this is important, that keeping good registrants in practice is an important part of the conduct process. Providing appropriate guidance and remediation can get practitioners back on track so that they can continue to provide effective care. So it's like a course adjustment, like if you think about it, right? This means that most matters are resolved through remedial action or advice if any action is taken. So that's really important as a clinician to know that that's right touch regulation. This is all part of the work of ensuring that we are working towards compassionate regulation across functions, particularly in our conduct processes. Most of you will be familiar with the review we did. This is, you can see it's Barbara Scheifler Clinic here. But we'll go into a little bit detail about the approach that we took and how we are, using that approach to our conduct work, in our conduct work rather. Despite the firm commitment to fairness, we understand that the complaints process can be traumatizing to both registrants and complainants. And so the drive to undertake this review was in consideration of all parties involved. We look at trauma through an intersectional lens, gender-based violence, including intimate partner violence, diversity, equity, and inclusion, including intersectionality, legal bullying, including frivolous and vexatious cases, and mental health symptoms and pathologizing. Broadly, our aim with changes coming out of the review are to improve the overall experience of those involved in the regulatory processes, which we realize can be inherently traumatizing. So what we do is to look, what are we looking at when we take a trauma-informed approach? We look to reduce re-traumatization for complainants who may be in the process, may begin the process from a place of past trauma. So for example, if you had a sexual abuse survivor complaining about a registrant, that process could be inherently re-traumatizing, particularly for them. So that would be an instance of re-traumatization. Fear, anxiety, stress for everybody involved, uncertainty around the steps that will be taken, and perception of unfairness, dissatisfaction with both the process and the outcome, avoidance or lack of engagement during the process and for registrants afterwards, and overly legal processes that can be a barrier to participating, particularly from people from historically marginalized community. So let's look at specific initiatives that are going on. I want to share some tangible changes with you. These policies are in place and are already shaping how we approach complaints. The third-party complaints policy deals with a complainant who is neither the client nor their authorized representative. Third-party complainants can include a former spouse, parent, or insurance company. This policy ensures that sensitive information is not divulged unnecessarily while ensuring that the panel is able to make a fully informed decision. The policy on declining complaints ensures that we are using college's resources appropriately. While CRPO takes all complaints seriously, the CRPO may decline to further investigate a small number of complaints in accordance with legislation. Example of this could include personal disputes that do not involve professional misconduct, incompetence, or incapacity, repetitious complaints after the first one regarding the same issues. So that's, a complainant could potentially complain 5 times about the same thing. And this indeed has happened. Complaints made for ulterior or improper improper reasons. Example would be harassment, legal bullying, or to influence the outcome of a separation dispute. Matters best addressed in another forum, for example, the courts, and inappropriate for CRPO to address. An example would be claims for financial compensation, intellectual property rights, access to health records. So the policy on accommodation strives to make the process more accessible for everyone. We are incorporating universal design, as Deb had mentioned previously, as much as possible for our processes. This means we strive to remove barriers so that people don't have to ask for accommodations. This was in relationship to the 7 hours that you have for the CBA, which removes burdens and stigma and ultimately makes processes more accessible for everyone. One example of this is that parties involved in a complaint have the option of making an audio or video submission rather than a written one. Trauma-informed work is now a standing part of our staff and committee work plans. I am ridiculously proud that this is happening in CRPO, because this is really cutting edge regulatory work. You can see here the ongoing list of initiatives that cover operational work at the college. Of note, we have added an intake coordinator who comes with a mental health and crisis background. Looking forward, we will be adding to our staffing to have someone to act as a navigator for complaints. This role will incorporate trauma training, and we'll have somebody who can provide neutral grounding support to complainants throughout the process. So very much a kind of supportive person, a real person in the process to help you. Ongoing work is happening across all functions to ensure that we are using plain language, not except for the acronyms, by the way. That is, I think, is going to stay forever, right, Deb? Yes, it's part of regulation. That we are considering how college communications land, and we are taking steps to provide support at every information sharing opportunity. So what does this look like? We ensure each recipient is aware of their role and their part in the process. We explain timelines and possible results. So really clear communication. When communicating with complainants, we seek out their input on such things as what's the frequency and mode of communication that they want? What would be alarming, for example, whether the name of the registrant would be in a subject line or mentioned at all, whether they want a publication ban. When communicating with registrants, again, we discuss frequency and mode of communication. We provide resources for support. Note that the professional associations are the ones who would be supporting registrants in that regard. When communicating with any party to a complainant, we avoid legalese, which is we want to talk in plain language to people. We don't want to be kind of not reachable. Deb, you're up.
So again, apologies for the tiny slide. It was really just to give you a sense of the number of people who are working at the college. I want to talk about operations just for 3 slides. I promise not to bore you to death with this stuff. Our staff team is growing to address the volume, as Callie has been talking about in terms of the numbers of complaints. We need to make sure that we have people to respond to those in a timely way. We want to make sure that we're effective as well. So we're looking at things like having as many as 5 panels some months. Typically it's 4 panels of the screening committee, the ICRC, but we do run 5 if we need to. Same with registration. We're running panels on a regular basis to make sure that we're looking at all the applications that need that peer review through committee. We have an ongoing policy review cycle. We definitely look at things on a rotating basis, but we also have triggers so that if something changes in the landscape, we need to be nimble enough to be able to stop and do the research and make sure that the policy or the guideline or the standard continues to be relevant, that it reflects changing public expectations, and that we're doing it in a robust, timely way. We're also staffing up to make sure, as Callie pointed out, that we have the right people in place to deal with things in a trauma-informed way. So that client-patient navigator and the other resources that go along with that to make sure that the complaints process is timely and fair. We're also making sure that we have enough French speakers on staff to be able to meet the needs of our French-speaking registrants and French-speaking members of the public. We now have that little circle at the bottom as our interpreter or translation hub. So we have in-house resources and somebody in every department who can field questions and work with registrants and members of the public in French. Forgive the wonky graphics. This is my attempt at AI generated pictures just to make it a little bit more interesting. The full financial statements are published every year in our annual report. I know it's dry reading, but it comes out in September and you are encouraged to take a look at it along with the CPMF. It's really a very comprehensive picture of all the work that the college is getting done over the course of the year, benchmarked against the other colleges and the work that the ministry expects us to do. Just a reminder, I'm sure you all know this, we're 100% funded by registrant fees. We work really hard to ensure that they're being used appropriately. Although our bylaws permit fee increases every 2 years, we look carefully at that process. Anybody who's been around for a little bit will remember that we didn't do any fee increases over COVID because we knew the pandemic was impacting people's ability to make a living. And when we do the increases, they're announced in June for the following renewal. So people have time to sort of take that into account if they need to in terms of their own financial planning. And those increases are in line with cost of living or inflation. They're never over and above that. Our fees actually remain at the bottom end of the fees for all the regulatory health colleges in Ontario. We're certainly in the bottom chunk. I know that people often compare to social work. They are considerably more people that they're collecting fees from, and so and their legislation is different than ours. So better to compare us to the other regulators of healthcare colleges. On the expense side, obviously staff is the largest expense. As I showed you in the couple slides ago, we're at 50 full-time equivalents now. Our registration staff, for example, is going to be 1920, up threefold from the 2020 staffing level, which was 8 folks working in registration. So as we see, and if you remember the earlier slide that Callie showed you, 38% increase in the number of applications over last year. So we really are continuing to see those numbers go up. Council and committees are also growing. This is in part due to the volume of work, but it's also because we're really committed to making sure we have the right mix of skills, expertise, and lived experience at the table. We now have 45 non-elected professional members working on committees versus the 15 folks who are elected or appointed to council. And that really is to make sure that we are looking at modality and community of practice, and as I said, lived experience. I also want to point out that we are making investments in technology. You've seen us moving through different iterations of our registrant management system. That's getting bigger. We're starting to develop our QA functions in that. So in the next year or so, you'll see your QA reporting look maybe a little bit different, and the reporting back to you will look a little bit different. We're also starting to build a conduct module so that the ability to make complaints is made more accessible, and our ability to mine data coming out of those complaints and reports is also improved. And I want to make sure that folks understand a few of the constraints that exist for regulatory colleges. We are legally mandated to have reserve funds for a number of functions. One is operations. It's just good business practice. If anything happened and we needed, for example, there was a flood and we needed to recreate everything, we would need to be able to make sure we had contingency funding for that. But more importantly and more significantly, from a regulatory perspective, we are obligated to see every complaint and report through to the end. So whether that is something that's really quick and is a take no action, or if it's something that goes all the way to discipline, that involves resources. It involves external legal counsel, investigators, counsel and committee time, and all the other resources that go into doing a full and fair investigation and dispensing of that complaint or report. We also have to have a budget for a mandatory sexual abuse fund. So this is across all colleges in Ontario. If someone makes a credible allegation of sexual abuse by a regulated health professional, they are entitled to access that fund. It's a little bit more than $17,000 per person. At this point, it goes up because it's indexed to inflation and the cost of psychotherapy and psychology consult fees. And so we have to anticipate having those funds available so that when we have a complaint where there are allegations or a report where there are allegations of sexual abuse and somebody makes a request for that funding, that we're able to provide that to them. So back to Callie so that she can talk about supply and demand.
I always like things that are balanced. So we received a number of questions and requests to speak on topics related to the number of RPs who are being registered in the province. So I want to address these questions, which seem to fall into several subtopics. So there was number one was the concern about the number of new registrants entering the practice and their impact on sustainability of the profession. Concern about practice readiness for some new graduates. Concern about new graduates opening private practices while still in the qualifying category. So let me start by speaking to the first concern, which is really about this, supply and demand. So regulatory colleges are responsible for ensuring this, that competent ethical practitioners who apply are appropriately registered to provide care in Ontario, period. We are required to ensure that registration requirements remain relevant, aligned with emerging best practices, and changing public expectation. We are also required to carry out registration processes in a way that is transparent, objective, impartial, and fair. These requirements incorporate ensuring that we are not creating or perpetuating barriers to entry into the profession for people from equally deserving communities and people who are internationally trained. So we answer to the government and to the Fairness Commissioner on these fronts. I want to emphasize that the college is not in the business of regulating how many qualified practitioners enter the profession. This is something that is driven either by market demand or by government intervention. So this is not within the purview of the college to decide. We want to be very clear about that. You are likely aware Ontario currently has a shortage of some healthcare workers and a high demand for their services. So we haven't actually reached capacity in Ontario. We could assume that, right, Dan? That's So in response, we've seen government initiatives such as of right legislation that requires changes to college decision-making processes and timelines with a view to rapidly increasing the supply of professionals through legislative and policy changes to registration processes, educational program expansions, and recruitment and retention grants. These actions highlight where the government is actively using legislative and policy levers to influence the supply side of the workforce equation through directives to the regulatory colleges. So entry to practice requirements are intended to be comprehensive and reasonable. So CRPO regulates on a competency versus credential basis. This approach was intentional given the diversity of programs and modalities to make up psychotherapy. So if you think of it, we have different credentials, but our underlying competencies would be across modalities. It doesn't matter how you practice. Those are underlying foundational things that are the competencies. Education, experience, and currency are considered, but as you know, there are other gates to full registration. Entry to practice exam and ongoing clinical supervision are key components of the process of becoming a full RP. We monitor exam results, as I noted, to ensure that we are not seeing flags around systemic issues with any particular group of people coming into practice. So that's why it's important for the college to collect data so we can see what's going on, so we can pull out trends, and then we can be proactive instead of reactive. If trends in any kind of registration step suggest there's an emerging risk, the college is in a position to address that risk with our system partners. For example, education process and the Office of the Fairness Commissioner. I want to cover one of the responses the college is proposing to address shifts in the application and registration processes. The CRPO's registration regulation allows for students to have substantially completed their program to apply for registration in the RP qualifying category. The intent of this requirement is that students close to graduating can be registered before they start working. In 2020, the registration committee decided that applicants could apply if they had substantially completed their coursework, even if they hadn't started their practicum. This was due to practicum delays during COVID. Prior to 2020, most students had already substantially completed or at least started their practicum by the time they registered with CRPO. Since this change, CRPO has observed the following. Some educational programs have been requiring students to register with CRPO prior to practicum. Students are opening private practices using RP qualifying title before graduating. The volume of exam extension requests for making an exam attempt within 2 years of initial registration has increased significantly due to incomplete education. I would say that happens. We always have that every time we sit on panel. CRPO circulated a public consultation on returning the requirement back to resemble the pre-COVID substantial completion definition more closely. So in response, CRPO received feedback from 723 individuals and 23 education programs, which was considered by the registration committee. To address the issues and concerns that have arisen, the registration committee is recommending that council approve the following minimum requirements for substantial completion of education and training effective Jan 1, 2027, so that 100% of the coursework would be completed and that graduation is within 3 months of applying to CRPO. That there's a minimum of 125 direct client contact hours and 30 clinical supervision hours successfully completed. Students would have to meet these requirements at the time they submit their application to CRPO. A letter from the education program confirming the student is expected to graduate within 3 months would be required. It is proposed that the 1 year notice before these changes come into effect so that programs have time to adjust their policy and procedures. Current students with an already approved practicum site can complete their practicum without disruption, and current students researching practice sites will have notice before they need an RP supervisor for the controlled act. So this decision has not come into effect yet. It will be brought to council at our December 11th meeting, and we will include updates in the CRP communiques and on the website regarding the outcome of this. Another response to ensure practice readiness is the comprehensive review of the competencies that will be taking place this year. The review will be driven by the guiding principles you see listed on the slide. And the goal is to ensure that they remain current, relevant, and responsive to evolving public expectations. Examples of this would include looking at skills related to electronic or virtual practice, incorporating new technology such as AI into practice, which Deb will speak to later. This is a very important topic and timely because AI is moving so quickly. So it will in the future have a big impact on us, and how we deal with it is sensitive, let's say, and more specific understanding of what it means to practice with cultural humility. We currently have 33 recognized programs and 1 accepted bridging program. As you can see from this slide, their recognition process allows education programs demonstrate that they meet the minimum requirements. Program recognition will necessarily be revised to take into account changes to the entry to practice competencies. Programs will also need to consider the substantial completion changes I had just covered and make sure that they are working with graduates to support them in application timing. I also want to point back to the data analysis that we've talked about, looking at complaints, themes, and trends, as well as to the questions we see registrants struggling with in the practice advisory. These data points are used to shape what we ask programs to address when they renew their recognition every 5 years. So what kinds of things need to be incorporated into educational programs, let's say, right, Dem?
Yep.
In the past, we have asked programs to speak on how they prepare graduates to deal with domestic violence, work with clients from LGBTQIA 2S+ communities, and electronic practice. This process is a dynamic one that allows the registration committee to ensure the programs are responsive. Some of the questions that were top of mind for people speak to concerns that new graduates were entering into private practice. I want to highlight that changes to the substantial completion criteria will ensure that this is not happening before program completion. Safeguards that are currently in place include standards that establish expectations regarding working under supervision. So that's very important for new practitioners because, you know, the safeguard really is the supervisor and supervisory relationship for new clinicians, right? As well as business practice related standards. That said, the requirement to practice with clinical supervision is business model neutral. A registrant, including an RP qualifying, can operate a solo practice, private practice, and contract with a clinical supervisor to oversee the supervisees' client care and professional development. So CRPO doesn't tell you whether or not, doesn't get involved in your business practice in that sense. There may be risk in this situation. Example, a registrant may be tempted to share limited information with their clinical supervisor, given the autonomy that they have over their own business. So that's really important that there's an open relationship, because when somebody is a new clinician, for example, in a qualifying category, they may feel uncomfortable talking to their supervisor because they don't want to look like they don't know something. But it's very important to have that relationship in a very cohesive way so that you feel you can get advice from somebody who has more experience. So a clear, strong supervisory relationship and supervision agreement is essential to ensuring the supervisee receives the support that they need. CRPO is continually considering whether additional resources or oversight are required for newer practitioner operating private practice. So this is not lost on us. So broad strokes, there are a number of things the college expects registrants to consider in determining if they are ready to start a private practice. First and foremost, when thinking about competence, do you have the skills and judgment? The knowledge, skills, and judgment. While competence primarily refers to providing psychotherapy to clients, it implies that one should have enough ability to operate a private practice without compromising client care. One aspect should not take away from the other. In other words, clients over admin or admin over clients. They are connected and essential. Related to this, registrants need awareness of applicable laws, or they need to get advice around accounting, tax implication of operating a business. Those are the things that are on the business side, which is different than what CRPO is overseeing in a sense. It would only, I'm thinking about when that would skate. You could have a business. Somebody could do something in their business that could be conduct unbecoming. Correct. For example, that if they were engaging in fraud, for example, that would be conduct unbecoming. So it's not that the regulator just doesn't have anything to do with your business. Your business is your business, but if something you're doing in your business is not a proper conduct, then it could be considered problematic and complaint worthy potentially. So where am I here? Never ad lib, Deb, because then you lose your spot on your screen. So CRPO provides some basic info, as I mentioned, doesn't give extended advice. So that's important to know. We note the basics that business can be set up as sole proprietorship, partnership, or professional corporation. We might need advice on which choice to make or how to set up paperwork, how to collaborate with other types of health professionals in your practice. Finally, supervision and consultation. Just because you own your own business, you still need to receive supervision if starting out or changing practice areas. So for example, if you're changing from one practice modality to another, you need supervision because you could be a newbie in that, say you're learning EMDR or something that you're not familiar with. It's very important that you get support when you're in a new modality. Private practice can be isolating. To avoid this and promote professional development, it is recommended to build professional relationships such as supervision or consultation and ensure robust collegial relationships which can help feed your growth as a clinician. I don't know how many of you are in private practice, but indeed it can be. So it's very important because we grow and learn in community with one another. And so it's important that you build your community of relationships with your other clinicians so that you can not only feed your practice and your learning, but you have emotional support in some way from your colleagues. In addition to reviewing the resources from the college, we routinely encourage registrants to discuss these matters with their professional association, legal, and financial advisors. Clinical supervision obviously plays a key role in ensuring new practitioners are operating in a way that is safe and ethical. Coming into effect April 2026, the following requirements will be in place. I'll cover the ones that are new or revised. So element number 2 on your slide is not new, but has a timing related change. The 5-year period begins at graduation, not before. So that's very important because sometimes graduation is delayed. So, you know, somebody could be registered with the college and then have a delay in their graduation because they didn't finish their practicum, and they might be able to be a supervisor. They could have previously been a supervisor earlier, whereas this sets the time frame in a way that's clearer. Element number 3 is the same, not new, but now clearer. Must be after meeting independent practice requirement with the college. And number 4, biggest change for people who were not supervising before April 1st, 2026. And for individuals who began providing clinical supervision before April 1, 2026, they already have 30 hours of directed learning. Maybe they've taken a course, maybe there's some other form of learning for 30 hours. For anyone who's new to supervising, they will need to complete a course that is dedicated to the specific competencies they need to supervise. The college won't pre-approve, accredit, designate, or list supervisors or supervision courses. We know that a number of associations are developing these, which is great. We have developed a supervision course guideline intended to assist course providers to promote excellent supervisor education. And number 5, finally, applies to everybody, new and existing, and I will cover the details of this for you. So this course is something that the college has developed and is online on the college's site. It requires an account setup, but it doesn't cost anything to do. And anyone who wants to provide supervision for college purposes will be required to complete it in the coming months. So we encourage you to take a look and make sure that you are ready to start by the new fiscal year. I want to bring, this is actually a great resource, just want to tell you. So I want to bring your attention to this. This was originally developed to help candidates who were required to complete educational upgrading before making a final exam attempt to assess their competence gaps and to develop a learning plan. So the tool, which is built as a way of, it's kind of a structured self-reflection that's used in conjunction with your supervisor, actually. Can be used for anybody preparing for the exam, can also help guide clinical supervision so that it effectively addresses gaps in knowledge. So anyone who's working under supervision or providing supervision could take a look at this, as you might find it useful for your own learning plan development. So if you're a supervisor, you could use this tool with your supervisee to help them assess and help you help them assess what their gaps in competency are, and you can develop a learning plan according to you by using the tool. It's very useful. And I'll hand it off to Deb. There you go. I put your slide there.
Thank you. So we did have quite a few questions about cross-border practice. I want to spend a bit of time on that, but I also want to point you to the fact that there are resources on the college website, and I'll show you a tool before we move on from this item. So to be clear, the college doesn't have any interest in prohibiting you from caring for clients outside Ontario. Last thing we want to do is see, one of your university age students or university age clients moving to another province for school and not being able to have you follow them to continue the therapeutic relationship that you've established. There are a few caveats that we want to make sure you're aware of. First and foremost, ensuring that the jurisdiction that this client is going to is not regulated by a regulator who does require you to register with them, even for virtual care. If that's something that's required, then that's not something the college will get involved with, but you certainly need to pay attention to it. The other piece is making sure that your professional liability insurance will cover you if you're seeing somebody outside the jurisdiction in which you typically practice. It's worth the phone call to check with your broker or your provider to make sure that you're covered. We'd also make sure, want to encourage you to make sure you're able to provide effective care in that jurisdiction. Somebody who may need referrals or support from outside providers, if you're not familiar with where they're going or what the resources are, what contingency and safety planning should you be doing with them before they go to make sure that they are able to access those resources if you can't actually navigate with or for them. And finally, we would note that problematic conduct in another jurisdiction, it would still follow you back to Ontario because you are under the umbrella of that conduct unbecoming clause that Callie was talking about and all the other pieces that make up professional misconduct, so that we would be obligated to look into that if there was a report made about your conduct that brought into question your ability to practice safely and ethically in Ontario as well. Similarly, we don't require practitioners who are residing in other jurisdictions to register with us if they want to work with a client or a couple of clients in Ontario, providing that they're not actually intending to set up practice here. We don't want people to live in another province and just skirt regulation by not registering with us because they're not here. Certainly, if we were made aware of somebody who was actively recruiting clients or had a number of clients, or substantial number of clients here, we would want to know what was going on with their practice and look into whether they were regulated elsewhere and whether they should be regulated by us. And so we are looking at that from an unauthorized practice. If they're holding out or they're providing the controlled act, we would be looking at it from that. So they can't use the title psychotherapist if they're not registered. They can't hold themselves out. And so we're monitoring that, but it's really not something that we want to be super restrictive, more in fact permissive, to make sure that, as I said, we're not interrupting continuity of care for folks. I do want to just point to the tool, though, that we have online. It's not fully interactive, but it is it's sort of a stepwise process that leads you through, asks you questions, gives you things to consider to figure out if, in fact, you are engaging in cross-border practice in a way that's acceptable. And now I'm back to Callie for looking at the standards.
Thanks, Deb. Okay, so as you likely know, we've completed completed a complete review of the professional practice standards, and the revised versions have been online for a year. We are in the process of developing 2 cultural humility standards, one general and one related to Indigenous cultural humility. These were originally developed by the DI working group and are now in the public consultation stage. We have had a very robust response to the first round of feedback. The information we gained from this is being used to make revisions, and we're anticipating circulating the revised standards in the new year before they move forward to council for approval and to adopt them. This is important work, and we will be communicating more about this in the coming months. We're back to you. That was a hop.
We're doing some jumping around.
There we go.
Thanks. So we did have a number of questions about this. Interestingly, we are having an education session for council and staff on December the 11th. That's going to get us really ready to speak about this a bit more. So I want to stay on top of what the process is going to look like, but then I also want to talk a little bit about the risks and things that we want you to be thinking about. So guidance will be forthcoming after the December meeting. I think it's really key to note that our 3-year policy review cycle is not going to serve us when it comes to AI. I feel like we need like a 3-week policy review cycle to stay on top of it. But anyway, I want to start with some practical issues. Clinical judgment will not cease to be the key to the work that you bring to or the skills that you bring to the table, regardless of where AI gets to us. It will continue to be expected that you exercise good clinical judgment in all of the care that you provide. This means that you must have human in the loop AI, right? You cannot pass things off to the AI and expect it to be making clinical decisions for you. You have to make treatment decisions because you're going to be held accountable for them, whether they're with an AI tool in the background or not. Competence is a bit of a worry, particularly for people who are new to practice or who are making changes in their practice. Lots to consider. If you're planning to use AI as a tool, you need to be competent to use that AI tool. Are you feeding it the right information? Are you getting the right kind of information back? Are you interpreting the information that it provides to you appropriately? Like electronic practice, AI is a specific skill set. You need to make sure that you have those skills if you want to use it in any kind of significant way. Secondly, it's important to consider if you're using AI to enhance the care that you provide or to fill gaps in your competence where you lack knowledge or skills, are you really going to be able to monitor the AI's performance in the way that you need to? So both of those things are going to have to be monitored. You also need to look at the competence of the technology. I'm sure you've all heard stories about AI hallucinating and coughing up results that are completely fictional. So does the AI know what it's doing in the first place? So all three layers of that need to be paid attention to. Privacy and confidentiality, this is already at play. If you're using an AI note taker to keep track of your sessions and to record them, where does that recording land up? Who has access to that information? Are you making sure you're protecting your client's confidentiality by using it? Same kind of conversations we had in the early days of online practice with all the platforms that came online very quickly to provide remote care, yeah? Transparency and informed consent. Clients have the right to know where their information is going. They need to understand where it's being housed, who has access to it, what might come of it. So making sure that they have the opportunity to decline in every session and that you have a backup plan. If somebody says yes to AI note taking in one session and then changes their mind at a subsequent appointment, are you ready to, go back to whatever your practice before that was so that you're not left with a gap? And you need to make sure that you're having those conversations regularly as the AI technology changes as well. For record keeping specifically, AI records need to be identifiable as AI records. You need to be able to distinguish those records that you took versus the one that the robot in the background took. Every record should be reviewed by you to make sure it's accurate and complete and you don't have any of that hallucination going on. One of the other things that I've been thinking about and in working with the consultant who's going to do our AI is the AI is not going to pick up on tone of voice. So if you're using it to summarize an exchange with a client about follow-up or any of the other things that you're seeking their consent to, if they respond sort of sarcastically, but sounds like the words that they're saying are in agreement, if their tone is telling you as a human that they're not, the AI is not going to pick up on that. So making sure that you're really attentive to those things that might go awry. Client use of AI, we know that it's getting pushed at people in every algorithm that they probably have open on their phone or their computer. And so if they're coming to you to ask about AI as an adjunct to the therapy that they're doing in the room or something they can take home and use for homework or for reflection, making sure that if you're recommending it in the same way that you would vet the people you might recommend for somebody to see as part of their circle care, you got to make sure that you're vetting that AI and that you know what you're recommending and that it's effective. And then the last piece I put in front of you is bias. We know that AI is learning as it goes along, but what is it learning from? So if it's learning from sources that are biased to start with, it's going to carry those biases forward. So especially if you're using it to help with assessments or summary notes or any of the things that sort of are a bit generative, even if they're not fully generative AI, those biases will still be there. So cultural humility, for example, may not at all be on the robot's radar. And so it may not take those things into account and you still have to. So we're going to be covering all of these elements in the guidance that's coming forward in the next month or so. So please do look out for it. As always, the practice advisory service is there to work through ethical and practice questions and queries with you, keeping in mind that we're learning and the practice advisors are learning and trying to keep up with those changes as they go along. The other piece that I think we should touch on just really briefly is the impact that AI can have on professional identity. A lot of the conversations that we're sort of having around professional identity and right touch regulation, the idea that the college is there to help support the growth of professional identity, not to burden you with requirements that are going to squash that out of you. We worry that AI might be something that impedes your ability to really fully realize your skill set and your competence. So it's already, we're starting to see evidence that it impacts professional judgment, that it impacts, and we see this, all the way from children all the way up to adult learners, processes for acquisition of knowledge and skills. Definitely impacts continuing professional development. It's a way to sidestep actually meaningful engagement with your professional development. And in my personal opinion, and I think in the college's position, it's really a lost opportunity for people to do self-assessment and make sure that they're filling in their knowledge gaps and they're not at risk of breaching standards. And then also reflective processes for critical sort of reflection that helps develop that professional identity. So if you're letting the robots do that critical analysis, you're missing an opportunity. So AI tools are being developed to enhance training, reflective practice, and quality assurance efforts. And we don't want to turn a blind eye to that. We just want to be very mindful of the emerging research into professional self-regulation. And I'm excited to hear, we're going to have the session with Dr. Zubin Austin, who's somebody who works in quality assurance and professional development and is looking at the Venn diagram where AI is in the mix. And so we'll be reporting back, and I encourage you to keep an eye on the communiques, because after we have that session, we'll definitely be publishing on that front. We did get a number of questions about the proposed changes to psychology entry to practice in Ontario. I know that that's something that's getting a fair bit of coverage. You can read the full discussion and the proposed changes in the College of, make sure I get their new title right, College of Psychologists and Behavior Analysts of Ontario. Their December meeting package is online, the same way that we post our meeting materials. If you just go on their website, you'll be able to Google it. We're going to share these slides afterwards, and I'll make sure the link to that is in there and is live. I think it starts about halfway through, but you can see they've been very specific about the criteria and the changes that are being proposed. I don't have any real insight into the timelines and when you can expect to see those things move through the college, but certainly they will. We work very collaboratively with our colleagues there. They're part of the same communities of practice that we are as registrar within our quality assurance, our conduct, our registration departments. We all work very collaboratively with all the colleges, but in particular with those ones that have the shared scope and the Controlled Act. And so we'll be keeping an eye on this. At this point, it's not for us to have a position or an opinion on it, but we are going to make sure that we're in the loop and we know what's going on, and encourage you, if you have reason to be concerned or interested in the changes that are happening over at the College of Psychologists, that you can keep track of that as well. I'm going to pass it back to Callie so she can wrap us up. We're slightly behind time just because we had that little bit of a delay, but we do have the space until 1, and we can keep going for a little bit if people, have questions.
Great, thanks, Deb. Okay, I want to acknowledge the great work that goes into educational programs and professional associations. And I really love Deb's little chair there, because it's not quite balanced, but when it is balanced, that means that the educational programs and the professional associations and the college regulator are all doing their job, and it's balanced. And it's important to know where the role of one stops and the other one begins. So that's really important. And I think sometimes there's confusion for people, particularly registrants, about what's the role of the so it's important to educate ourselves about that. What's the role of the regulator, and what's the role of your associations, and whose job is what. So along with us as the regulator, these organizations are key to professional stability and sustainability. The college is pleased to work with our system partners, supporting their efforts to provide professional development, advocate for funding and benefits, and represent the profession's interests. While the college has no role or authority on many of these, we recognize their importance and are always happy to contribute the regulatory perspective to them. And just of note, there's regular communication between, Deb has regular meetings with associations and with system partners to share knowledge and to support, their initiatives also. So just to wrap up, I want to cover a few of the challenges and how we are planning to respond to these over the coming year. Left-hand side of the screen are the challenges we have, and the right-hand side are the opportunities we are taking advantage of to address those challenges. The first and second challenges, increase in applicants and registrants, and the concern regarding whether these folks are ready to practice, are obviously linked. The undertone to this is that the market is saturated. This is a place where regulators need to tread carefully. It is not our place to regulate the number of professionals, just to make sure that those who do gain registration are competent. So it's really important to get that that's the role of the regulator. Rather than focus, our focus is on ensuring our entry to practice requirements are current and they remain relevant, as well as the work that we do to support those who are regulated to ensure that they remain competent. The college, as I mentioned, will continue to ensure we are registering competent ethical practitioners, and will provide supports along with our system partners to ensure that they have resources as they need to build their practices. Our governance work is focused on competence and ensuring that we are grounded in the principles of DEI. We have grown our community through the appointments so that we now have more than 45 professionals working on stat and non-stat committees. And these folks are much closer to representing the diversity of the public we serve. So that's really important. So we get to pick those folks, and we are picking them very consciously so that we have diversity. And that's very important so that the college is representing, there's a reflection of the broader community at large. So a specific example of the kind of recruiting we are doing are efforts to have registrants who are from Indigenous communities to review applications that come through our Indigenous pathways. Lastly, ensuring registrant engagement is an ongoing opportunity for us to support safe, effective practice. So here's my pitch to get involved. So I've been with the college since 2015, just shortly after we became regulated. And I can say it has been one of the most amazing experiences in my career to be involved in the development of our college. And I'm very proud of where we have landed to today. And I would think that any registrant, who wants to participate, to bring your expertise, your insight, your voice into a regulatory opportunity to engage in a way that you can help shape how things move forward. CRPO is an environment that's inclusive. It's not completely dry and stuffy. We are not completely dry and stuffy. That's an illusion. There is a lot of camaraderie. And I think what makes me most proud is that we are really, I would say, on the forefront of regulatory excellence. This is my personal opinion. And what I mean by that is we're really thinking about how to make things just, fair, equitable for everybody. And, our job is public protection, but we're also making sure that we hear everybody's voice and that different voices are included. So we really consider, I really want you to consider getting involved. We do recruitment on a biannual basis. So we would really encourage you to consider getting involved. I really want to erase the idea that the regulator is a scary object or a scary being. That is not true. It's really to ensure excellence in our profession, and we should all be proud that we're regulated. It's an honor to be part of the CRPO. So I'd like to thank you for your time today. And now I'm going to hand it off to Deb to get our question period started. And apologies again for our delay.
See if I can get the mic to sit still. So yeah, what we're going to do is we're going to end the slides, but we will be, as I said, circulating those. So they'll be available on the website. I really encourage you to take advantage of the emails that are there. These are the places where you can reach folks and we'll be able to get questions answered. We're going to end the slideshow if we can. so that we can see our colleagues and your peers in the other sites. And then Callie and I are going to sit up here. What we're going to do is take turns having questions. The staff will show you in each of the sites where they need you to stand. Really need you to use the microphones. I'm sorry, even if you have a nice, big, loud, clear voice, in order for it to go through the live stream feed and so everybody can hear, it's important that you use the microphone. So Callie and I are going to perch ourselves on these ridiculously high seats and then take questions. So sound folks, can you keep track of the, like, I'm going to turn this microphone on. Okay. Okay. But I don't want them to start creating havoc in the other sites. Okay, great. So
good. Okay, thanks.
So it looks like somebody's already teed up in Ottawa. Is that right? Yeah, go ahead, please, Ottawa.
Let's get this party started. Thank you so much, Callie and company, for your creativity here today and all the work that you do to keep us organized. It's a lot of work. And yes, so just gratitude. And I'm very humbled to be in the presence of so much wisdom in these spaces. I'm a new qualifying registrant, and I wondered if you could speak to sort of the collective direction of the college in terms of, I don't know how far out you plan, 5, 10, 20 years, 7 generations. Like, I wondered if you could speak a little bit to how we are moving as a collective into the future. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. That's a great question. So the college operates on basically a 3-year cycle. We do strat plans that last for 3 years. We have a policy review cycle that is 3 years. Also, obviously, the policy review can be triggered if there's something that warrants our attention before the 3 years. We're not ossified, so we're able to keep looking at things on a regular basis. The strat plan that covers 3 years has annual work plans attached to it so that we can monitor our own progress, and we report out to it to you folks and to the rest of the public through the college performance measurement framework. So I think that, you know, we certainly have our eyes set on further than 3 years from now, but I think in order to be responsive, especially as things start to shift, like AI, like the regulatory landscape, we wouldn't plan much further than that 3 years. And we're still shocked at the numbers that are coming in. Frankly, the government expected us to cap out at about 5,000, and we're still seeing that growth happen. Part of it, I think, is because people aren't retiring. Certainly remote practice has made that easier. But numbers wise, we're sort of looking at on an annual basis, and we'll be keeping track of when we plateau. And I think once that happens, we'll be able to start to make different decisions about planning timing. If we could go to, I think I see somebody in Thunder Bay ready to go, and then we could move to Toronto if there's nobody in Waterloo. Thunder Bay, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Sarah Spencer. I'm a registered psychotherapist in independent practice and private practice. And I'm also a supervisor. And I'm already finding it difficult to secure clients for students, and it makes it difficult for them to fulfill their practicum requirements. So I'm just wondering if the CRPO will have a designation available for students, so something before qualifying, so that it's easier for us as supervisors to get clients for them, because the designation actually helps quite a bit.
Sure, that's a good question. And the college has in the past considered the registration statuses. The fact that people who are qualifying, you know, in the COVID changes that have happened notwithstanding, can register as they're finishing allows that transition so that we're covering the space in between potentially. But students who are working and who are part of a program should have insurance and should be able, professional liability insurance, and should be able to work. We are not in a position to try and shift the burden in terms of them being able to secure clients, and I'm assuming you mean third-party coverage insurance for them. That's the coverage that you're referencing, Sarah? Sorry, I see you've left the mic. Sorry, make you come back.
No problem. It's just actually finding clients. So if someone is just an intern or a student, clients see them differently than if they have a designation. So even just securing clients without insurance coverage is difficult.
Fair enough. Yeah, and I think the more that we work with the education programs to integrate clinical experience into the programs that they're running, probably that will become less of an issue. But I hear you that it's a problem, and I don't have an answer for you. And certainly making a student designation is not something that's been on the college's radar to date.
Okay, thank you.
Vicky.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Go ahead. Hi, I'm Vicky Lee. I've been an RP for almost 8 years, and I'm also a clinical supervisor. I have a question specifically more about the complaint process. I'm wondering, can the CRPO clarify how it safeguards the public in situations where evidence of sexual abuse by a therapist has been brought forward and the therapist is still allowed to continue to practice while the investigation is still going on?
I don't know if our conduct department wants to take that or if you want me to. Nakai or Mark? There we go.
Hi, I'm Garnett, Director of Regulatory Affairs, and I work in the Professional Conduct Department. So, great question. So there are a number of factors that we use to be able to address sexual abuse allegations. So one thing we do when upon receipt of a complaint or report that when there's an allegation of sexual abuse is that we prioritize that investigation. And we try to move that along quickly as efficiently as possible. Depending on the nature of the investigation, sometimes it does take longer than we hope and plan. In addition, there are measures that colleges can take when there is an immediate risk of harm, and that's entrenched in the legislation. And one of those things is an interim order, which could be either an interim order to suspend the registrant certificate of registration or impose terms, conditions, and limitations. Now, I know often registrants sometimes ask, well, there's an allegation against with respect to one client. Why is a registrant still able to practice? There is quite a bit of case law that has made it clear that there's quite a high threshold in order to be able to impose an interim order to suspend a registrant certificate of registration. So when there are an ongoing allegation and investigation, that does not necessarily mean that the ICRC has enough information and evidence, if you will, to be able to impose an interim order of suspension. So often they start with trying to negotiate an undertaking with the registrant to not practice. That way there's a buy-in by the registrant. And if that's not a possibility, sometimes they're able to impose an interim order of suspension. But that does come with some risk where it could be challenged by the registrant. And the courts have, as I mentioned, weighed in that there is very high threshold. I hope that answers your question.
Just one more quick thing. With this kind of request, like should the complaint contact the ICRC directly, or who is the best department to discuss something like this?
I think I missed the beginning of the question, so I'm going to repeat it just to see if I am clear. Oh. I think the question was, who do we contact if we have a concern with respect to an allegation of sexual abuse regarding a client?
More like in the sense that for something like this or a follow-up for the complaint, which department would be the best for them to reach out to for any kind of these like follow-up questions or supports?
Oh, yes. Thank you. So you'd reach out to the Professional Conduct Department, and our email address is complaints@crpo.ca, and you'll see that listed on the last slide for the town hall slides.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks, Nakai. Looks like Ottawa's teed up again. Yep, go for it.
Quick question. What would be the next step for a qualified registrar who fulfill all the other requirements except the hours within 5 years?
The registration team want to take that one, Sarah?
So your question is, you've passed the exam, but you haven't accumulated all your hours to transfer to RP, is that right?
Yes, for 5 hours, for 5 years, and everything else is successfully.
So if you're coming up on that 5 years, CRPO will reach out to you in advance to remind you of your upcoming deadline, how many outstanding hours that you have. You can request an extension to that deadline if you have extenuating circumstances. Let's say you didn't request an extension or an extension was denied, your registration would expire and you could reapply to CRPO. Your past exam attempt would still be on file and you wouldn't be required to retake the exam. you'd get another 5 years to complete those outstanding hours in the RP qualifying category under clinical supervision.
Thanks, Sarah. Waterloo, I can't tell whether there's somebody at the mic there or not.
Yes, we do have a question here in Waterloo. Just a moment.
Hello, my name is Pamela. I have been in my practice providing supervision to RPs and also to RPQs who are in their practicums. A disturbing increase now of agencies that are either RPQ led, taking interns in substantial numbers, right? Beyond their ability to provide the hours, which is a university issue, I'm sure. But my concern is that what's happening is that agencies can become, the desire of the agency may supersede the supervision that the intern is receiving externally. And that those relationships are problematic. My query to you is, will the CRPO give consideration to accreditation of agencies who take students?
I can take that to start with and pass it off to the Reg team if they want to add anything. Not at this point. The clinical supervision standards and the requirements around clinical supervision are pretty explicit. And so the expectation that there is a formal supervisory agreement in place, that it covers the scope of practice, that the appropriate number of hours are being provided, and that the supervisor is providing the oversight that's needed are in place. And so accrediting agencies is outside the scope of what the college is in a position to do. And I'd argue that, you know, we're holding the individual supervisors accountable. So if there's a clinical supervisor who's agreed to provide these things and is not doing it, as an RP, they're obligated to meet the standards the same as their supervisee is. And so it's definitely already enshrined in there. I do acknowledge that the numbers and the volume and the speed with which those things are going up is something that we need to be attentive to. And that's one of the reasons why we're making the changes we are around the criteria for clinical supervisors, why we're pushing the substantial completion back. And we'll continue to work with education partners to make sure that they're clear in terms of their obligations to provide, students with the ability to obtain the competencies that are required. Did the Reg team want to add anything to that? Okay, I don't see anybody running for the mic. So I think we'll take a question from Toronto and then we'll go back to Thunder Bay.
Hi, my name is David Collins, and I'm a registered psychotherapist with the college and practice 12, 15, I know, lots. I have a very strong concern of the online outside of the province therapists that are being offered right down to the point of chatbots that are being, and what power does the college have for people outside of Ontario providing, I would say, I don't want to deal with this, by there being a death, and that's when we start looking into this. Like, there is some really, really bad advice that's being given to Ontarians under the guise of being psychotherapy, and it's huge. It's a huge portion of the market. It's a huge portion of what Ontario citizens are engaging in. And I was wondering if there's an advocacy role, if there's an education role, if there's a legislation and criminal role. If we did what these online people are doing for the profit motives that they're doing it, we'd all lose our license, everybody in this room. So how is that being faced? It's a huge business. It's run by the dollar. It's not run by a concern for human beings. And so there needs to be some strong opposition to this and some strong definition. It's very different than following 1 or 2 clients when they go to university and remaining their therapist. Yeah. This is in a different world. And I wonder what is the college doing? What as members can we do and help educate our clients so that they're passing on the information to their friends who are asking, oh, you go to therapy, what's that like? I can get it for $12 online. Yeah. You can. And literally there are dead bodies that have followed this around. People have committed suicide based on this this type of advice. There's also probably some great therapy that's going on too.
Sure. Yeah, no, I want to start with your question about what you can do. I think that certainly as 17,000 voices through your associations, you really have the opportunity to get some advocacy started in terms of that sort of piece of it, going through the multiple channels to get to the same problem, I think is usually the most effective. So seeing you doing that with your association, I think could be really effective. The college is limited in the authority that we have, as you know, to the regulation of individuals. And so we don't have any reach into businesses. We, as much as we might like to, we can't deal with these, largely out of jurisdiction, as you point out, online therapy services that are being offered. We are in conversation with the government about it. They're aware of it. It's up to them ultimately, if from a business perspective, to sort of deal with that. We have a role, I think, to educate the public. So there's certainly more that we could be doing to get information out there, insofar as we can drive traffic to the website and get people looking at that. The AI work that we're about to undertake will contemplate some of that. I think that the chat bots and the lawsuits that we're starting to see happen are, as you say, evidence that there are problems in the mix. So it is something that's it's very live, the situation. It's not something that I think has reached its sort of, water finds its level. Water has not found its level in this case. So we are looking at what we might be able to do, but the honest answer is that we are limited to the authority, the lane that we operate in, and will continue to be so. I don't see the government expanding the regulatory authority to sort of deal with those kinds of business related issues. I think that we've got some mic reverb, so I'm going to mute this. We're going to go to Thunder Bay, I think, first, and then we'll see where else we've got questions.
Hello, my name is Fahad, and my question is around upgrading from qualifying status to full RP. So in this, like if somebody has more than a decade experience overseas, like is there a way we can claim that experience, like both supervision as well as direct client hours? And if there is consideration for that, like what is the procedure for that?
I can let the Reg team speak to that generally.
Any clinical experience that's been accumulated since the start date of your psychotherapy program can be reported towards meeting the requirements to transfer from RP qualifying to RP and for RP independent practice. So as soon as someone registers, they just would report those hours in their account. We'd be looking at supporting documentation, and we have our supporting documents checklist to outline what documents you can submit or what alternatives would be an option. We'd be looking at what's the definition of a clinical supervisor in the jurisdiction where the hours were completed to make sure that they were competent to supervise psychotherapy.
Thanks, Sarah. Why don't we stay with Ottawa for the next question?
Hi, my name is Seema. I'm a private clinician. I just have a feedback regarding, I recently gave the CBA, and my feedback is it a possibility you guys can break it in 2 segments? There were 30 questions. They were all very good questions, and it was like 7 hours for that. Having said that, to be sitting there for so long, it was after, like, I would say, like, around 10 questions, the saturation point started hitting, and we were not able to pick 1 or 2. We had to line all the best, strongest to the weakest response. So is it a possibility? And my take was, if it was 15 questions, part 1 and part 2, for 3 hours each, and you guys can give us a time frame of like 1 week we had to finish it, I think it would have been a much better idea for me, especially because a person like me, I have to go through, and I was really enjoying all the questions, I was really enjoying all the scenarios, but the saturation point hitting was very tough, and I had to start rushing. So this is just a feedback, and I hope everybody supports that.
Thank you. So a couple of things just really quickly. I don't want to get too far into that because there's lots to be said. Most people are finishing it. The vast majority of people are finishing it in 3 to 4 hours. So the 7 hours, again, is an accommodation sort of universal design step so that people don't have to ask for it. You can ask for an accommodation. If there's a reason why you need to break it into 2 days, that's certainly available and you can do it. The reason there are 30 questions and there are 5 answers are twofold. One, to simulate real world as much as we can, that there isn't a binary, it's this is the right answer, that's the wrong answer. And also to give us enough data points, the 5 points, all of which have points associated, points in your score associated with them, are needed in order to be able to get a statistically significant result and figure out where people's gaps really are. But thank you. I appreciate the feedback, and we keep monitoring it. We're more than halfway through in terms of the registrant base, and so we'll be looking at that with the QA committee. I think Waterloo and then Toronto, if that's okay. Waterloo, do you have somebody queued up there? I can't tell.
Hi, my name is Liz, and I have a couple questions. Well, a question around some ebb and flow. I had doing supervision with a student and ran into some difficulties with the college of them not taking the advice of the person going forward and having some grave concerns. So politically, I walked away, and I am now in a position where I'm thinking, okay, I can take this on again. I can maybe not through that college, but doing some supervision. So again, that ebb and flow of life, just wondering around the supervision piece of going back to it and then being approved again to be supervisor and that loop, but mainly where the information I can find now on the website around the new supervision information.
Sure, we're going to link all that in the presentation, but what I would say just really briefly is that once you've met the criteria, provided that you continue to be an active registrant, you don't have to re-qualify. You're good to go once you've done the 30 hours and the supervision module. So we'll make sure that that's out there. It's on the website, and we'll link it, as I said, in the presentation. Over to Toronto. Sure. Okay. Do you mind if we, yeah. Okay, but you'll need the microphone for sure. Yeah.
There you go.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Want me to speak now? Is that all right with you? Absolutely. Okay. I'm going to make a few comments and I'm going to just make comments and questions within that. All institutions go through a process of growth. And when I look, I've been, by the way, my name is Rita Kohli. I'm a psychotherapist. I wear many hats. And once upon a time, I was a human rights investigator and then all kinds of things, instructor, college, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll leave that aside. My questions are related to sexual abuse of clients. And I'm just making a comment. At some point, institutions take a position of zero tolerance for sexual abuse, rather than whether the standard is too high to prove. It creates a liability for what the college wants to prevent, which is not to harm a client. Okay. Yeah. Otherwise, if you don't, you may consider that you're looking after the interest of the alleged perpetrator. The other question is, you can find some very benign ways of protecting both parties' interests while the investigation goes. Is your balance, are you using the standard? This is a question of balance of probabilities or beyond a reasonable doubt. So those two also have implications about how decisions are made and what is the skill level. Is it lawyers who are doing the investigation? And even then, are institutions using a balance of probabilities because it is related to the Human Rights Code, right? So that is one question. And the other, I'm just going to make a comment. In the evolution of organization as an organizational capacity building consultant who has fought for changes in institutions historically in the nonprofit from there and various movements, if you look at it, your presentations, it's a critical feedback. Your presentation, I want to, so first of all, just say wonderful work. That doesn't dismiss the possibilities of us re-looking as to how to improve ourselves further. So I'm coming from that place as a racialized practitioner as to, has somebody done, first, your DEI references are in 1, 2, 3, sometimes 4th entry point. Is DEI incorporated in your overarching principles that will guide all your organizational systems, from governance to entry retention of practitioners, and for preventing your mandate, which is to save harmless the entity as well as your clients, our clients who are vulnerable. So I just wanted to raise this as a political question, because DEI once again has been co-opted into serving the interests of white supremacy. So having said that, is there something that you all can consider to rethink and retinker and politicize DEI and intersectionality from a racialized lens, which takes care of actually both?
Sure. So I'll answer your question about DEI, and then Mark, if I can get you to weigh in on the sexual abuse and the way that the legislation works on that front. So the college has in fact integrated DEI. We have a DEI working group of 15 members. It's been up and running for almost 4 years. And so that group provides advice on all of the work that we do. They're the ones who've developed the cultural humility standards you'll see coming out. And they're also the folks who review all of our processes. We have had a concerted effort on the DEI recruitment front. As Callie and I think both mentioned, that we have 45 professional members now who are committee members. So they outnumber the elected and appointed members 3 to 1. And the whole push for that recruitment process has always been around looking at the voices that are missing from the table. So we have been doing that for almost 4 years. And I think we're getting there. We're still not 100% there, but we're getting there. As far as the council and the appointed members of the public are concerned, more work to be done because we don't have the control over that. We are also working to integrate self-identification data into all of the data that we collect so that all of our processes can undergo a thorough and comprehensive equity impact assessment, so that we can make sure right through from application to discipline that all of our processes are being subjected to that equity lens, to make sure that we are not either creating new barriers or making perpetuating barriers that already exist. Mark, are you set to go? Can you answer the question about sexual abuse and the standards and zero tolerance?
Oh, yes. Thank you. This is Mark Pioro, Deputy Registrar and General Counsel in Ottawa, though off camera. CRPO does have a published zero tolerance policy position on its website concerning sexual abuse of clients by registrants. There is also a regulation and policy in place holding that this zero tolerance approach applies for 5 years after ceasing treatment of the client with mandatory penalties, and may in fact never be appropriate after 5 years, depending on the circumstances. The college retains professional investigators. It has the burden of proof, which you could say means innocent until proven guilty. Fairness to the respondent is of utmost concern. And just on a legal technical level, the college works with the balance of probabilities evidence standard using cogent, convincing, and clear evidence, not what you might hear in the criminal context, such as beyond a reasonable doubt.
Thank you for your patience. Go ahead.
Of course. Hello, I'm Mike Barzigari, and I've been with the college since 2022, and thank you for this insightful session. I have this question about the CRPO's perspective and regulations over what is above and beyond a regular talk therapy, including psychedelic assisted therapy and use of RTMS or other neuromodulation techniques like TDCS or maybe even neurofeedback. That's my question.
Sure, that's a good question. So we actually do have guidance that we've been working on for a really long time with regards to psychedelics. We are trying to get some buy-in and some engagement with government to make sure that we're not creating sort of unreasonable expectations for registrants. We're aware that there's a vibrant sort of underground scene of psychedelic work going on. And so there may be clients who are using psychedelics on their own and coming to the psychotherapist for integration afterwards. So we're looking at making sure we're framing that guidance appropriately. We don't weigh in on modalities typically. So the requirements that you are competent, that you are operating within your knowledge, skills, and judgment, and that you're doing so in accordance with all the other standards. So we haven't in the past commented on modalities. It's part of the regulation that talks about, or sorry, the information on the Controlled Act that talks about what is psychotherapy and what's an adjunct to it. But it's not something that we plan on sort of getting into sort of these specialties or these modalities. But the guidance on psychedelics is overdue, in my opinion. We've worked on it, as I said, for a long time, and it will be forthcoming. So we want to make sure that we're getting it right before we put it out. But it's a good question. Thanks. So I think we're going to wrap up pretty soon, but if we can take the questions that are already queued up, we'll come back to Toronto in just 1 second. So I see Ottawa, and I think Waterloo has somebody as well.
Waterloo has 2, yeah.
Okay, go for it, Waterloo. Do you want to go first?
Sure, thanks. Okay, thank you. My name is Jamie, and I am a new registrant, sorry. And I apologize if this takes me a second. I will try to be as quick as I can. I first off want to say that I am also a big support of the not the last question, but the individual who spoke beforehand about politicizing practice, and that CRPO existence and just a mental health industrial complex in general is a supporter of, has been a supporter of white supremacy, and that is a huge, huge important thing that I think the CRPO could be doing better at acknowledging. And that kind of does relate to my question, which, yes, it has to do with the complaints process and the information that was given at the start of the presentation, which I really did appreciate the information about the trauma-informed practice being applied to this. But in reviewing the standards of practice, it's clear, or in my understanding, there's very little information that we are required as registrants to give clients regarding the complaints process. From what I can see, it is only that we inform the CRPO of their existence, and that they set the rules and consider the complaints about registered psychotherapist. All of the other standards within that standard are started with an if asked, which imply that it's the client's responsibility to ask the psychotherapist about other information regarding the complaints, which includes their right to file a complaint. So just kind of based on that information, I am curious if the CRPO considers the number of complaints that they get, if it accurately represents the potential harm that is happening in therapy spaces, because of this very little information that we are required to give our clients. It's not necessarily that that's happening. There could be more information that is given, but that is the standard that is outlined in the professional practice.
Thank you. I don't know if we are able to give you a quantitative answer. We certainly look at the number of complaints that come in and the reports that come in. We encourage mandatory reporting where it's appropriate. There's a tool on the website to help you understand whether you as a regulated health professional are in a position where you need to do mandatory reporting. In terms of the information that you share, that's very interesting feedback. Would like to hear more about that in terms of what, sort of the thoughts are around what's required. What we require of registrants in terms of the complaints process is pretty standard across the board for the RHPA, but I find that very interesting, and I'd love to engage more on that front. I think there was a second question from Waterloo, if you want to do that really quickly, and then because we're going to have to wrap up, it's really going to be one in Toronto, one in Ottawa, one in Waterloo, and then we have to call it a day.
I think the person left, so unless there's any other questions, then we can hand it over to the next.
Let's skip to Ottawa then. Thanks, Alexandra. Go ahead, Ottawa.
Thank you. My name is Michelle, and I'm an RPQ, and I had a follow-up question about the saturation question. So I'm wondering, you clearly explained that for the CRPO, it goes beyond your role as a regulator. Just wondered if you could move beyond that to more clearly explain for all of us more the political landscape. So I don't know if there's someone there from your policy team just to say, okay, well, like who really regulates that? But because to say that it's government, I'm not sure how much government has a say in private institutions graduating large numbers of graduates, and who really regulates that? What say do people have? It would be helpful just for especially new people coming into the practice to really know who is controlling that, what say people might have to influence it, what organizations might have a say, and what the future looks like.
Yeah, good question. That's definitely something that would be an association role as opposed to a regulatory role. We would have our hands wrapped quickly and violently by government if they thought that we were doing anything to turn the tap off. It is not our job to say how many psychotherapists are needed. It's definitely something that would be happening through your associations, through advocacy to the government. Our job, as we said, is just to make sure that people coming in are competent. I would suggest that if you look at the way the government is moving towards as of right, which means if you're regulated elsewhere, practicing elsewhere, including in some professions in the States, in other jurisdictions in Canada and in the States, then they have just passed legislation for a number of colleges, not ours, but for a number of colleges that say if you're regulated in good standing in those places, you can practice in Ontario. So the messaging that we're getting from the government is that they want to see the taps turned on. Now, I appreciate that, the market will drive ultimately how many people can make a living, and that will be something that will regulate in the same way that market forces do elsewhere. I think just in Canada, we're not used to thinking about healthcare as kind of a commodity or as a for-profit kind of thing, and so the idea that would get regulated is not necessarily something that's in the height of people's consciousness, but it's definitely something that would happen. So again, not to toss the ball, but just to sort of say that that's your association's role would be to do the advocacy work there. So if we can go to Toronto now.
My name is Alex. I'm an independent RP category. I was born and raised in Ukraine, to be precise, in Southeast Ukraine. I'm heavily trained in, so I'll describe the situation and ask the question. I'm heavily trained in dialectical therapy and trauma-informed care. In fact, I do a lot of trauma work. And I'm bombarded with requests to accept clients from other provinces. So basically, so the place where I was born and grew up, about 4 million people have escaped from. Prevailing majority of population incurred, like women have been raped. I will spare the details. So people are contacting me because of who I am and what I can do, and culturally language concordant care. And I'm telling them, listen, I'm in Ontario, you're in Manitoba and Calgary. I know that you don't have college of psychotherapists. I'm telling, so you will make a knee transfer. I will give you a legitimate, I will give you a legitimate receipt in which it says, here's my license number, here's who I am, here's the nature of therapy. Like I'm giving them official receipt as per college's requirements. I have no idea where that receipt will go. They are officially telling me, listen, I'm in Manitoba and I'm in Calgary. I'm saying, well, there is no College of Psychotherapists of Manitoba and Calgary, but but they demand, and I'm doing that online via Doxy, which is proprietary encrypted telemedicine software. Am I in trouble with the college?
Nope. I point you back to the cross-border therapy. We don't have any prohibition elsewhere. We can take it offline and I can show you the resources. You just need to make sure your professional liability insurance covers you. So and in both of those places that you just referenced, there are no regulators. So there's nobody there who would have any issue with you providing care there.
So my liability is from Lloyd, and Lloyd covers me throughout Canada. And when I call them, I have my own agent who works with me. So I've called him and said, listen, he said, if you wish international coverage, we can cover you in Holland and Thailand. All you need is just to pay. So my liability covers me throughout all 12 provinces in Canada, but I have no idea where my receipt goes. And all I know, they are legitimately telling me I'm in Lethbridge or I'm in that small town.
Sure, and if you're sending
Manitoba,
receipts there, then I think you don't need to worry. Let's take it offline because I think that's a good question, and we do have resources. I'm happy to go through that stuff with you.
So you're not censoring that.
We're not worried about that. No.
Thank you.
No. So I'm really conscious of the fact that we've gone right to the end of our time together. There are sandwiches for the folks in Toronto in the other room. Please, even if you can't stick around for a few minutes and have one, grab one in an Ackman and take it with you. Slides will go out. A survey around what you got out of this will go out. We really appreciate you spending the morning with us, and we hope that it was useful. Thank you again.
I'm so happy I didn't like talk my way to death.